Out on the Wyoming plains, a good man can lose everything in the space of a single misunderstood moment. The kind that can put a rope around a neck and a stain on a young woman's name without a shot ever being fired. Before the next minute passed, someone was going to ride away with a story, and it would not be the truth. On the open ground near Laramie, Clara sat twisted against a fallen cottonwood, half propped, half collapsed. Her dress was clenched in both fists like she was trying to tear it in two. Her eyes were too wide, her mouth open, and she looked like she'd just watched the devil ride up smiling. Silas knelt close enough to look guilty from 100 yards off. Older, sunburned, hands thick from years of work, he was already holding his bandana, his breathing fast and shallow, like he'd been running inside his own ribs. That was the excitement in him, not desire. But the clock ticking loud in his blood. It wasn't hunger. It was urgency. The kind that makes a man move before pride has time to speak. Clara's knee jerked as his hand shifted toward her thigh, and she flinched as if a blow were coming. She didn't scream. Screaming didn't stop men out here. She didn't beg. Begging only fed the wrong sort of appetite. She swallowed hard, lifted the hem with shaking fury, and said the words that could ruin them both. If you want to, just do it. She said it like she'd already decided all men were the same, and she was done hoping otherwise. Silas froze, and for a sharp second the whole world held its breath. Then the truth showed itself. 2 close puncture marks, swelling already spreading under skin hot from sun and panic. A rattlesnake bite, fresh enough that fear still had teeth. Silas knew the venom was bad, but he also knew a crowd could kill faster than poison. If folks thought they had reason, they didn't wait. He pulled his hand back, palms open, and his voice went hard with urgency. "Don't move, miss. Don't fight me. I'm trying to keep you breathing." Behind them, hoofbeats began to gather in the grass. Faint at first, then steady, then sure. And if 3 riders crested that low rise right now, the poison would not be the worst thing to reach her first. Because the next thing Silas had to do to save her would look exactly like the thing that could get him killed. Out here, people didn't wait for facts. They waited for a picture they could repeat. A girl with her skirt up meant one story. An older man on his knees meant another. And a rope didn't ask which one was true. Clara hadn't started that. Morning planning to be alone on the plains with venom in her leg and a stranger on his knees. She'd come west on a promise written neat and polite, the kind of letter that talked about work and shelter and a clean start. Less than an hour earlier, she'd stood at a ranch outside Laramie, dust on her shoes, hope doing most of the walking for her. The man who met her smiled easy, spoke soft, and then ordered a door shut like she was ahead of cattle being counted. Something in his eyes had gone flat, measuring instead of seeing. He talked the way men talk when they're used to, getting their way without raising their voice, calling it protection while they closed the door. Clara heard the latch click and understood all at once that she was about to become a line on somebody else's paper. She didn't argue. She ran. She heard boots on porch boards behind her, a man calling her back, calm as if he were calling a dog, through fence wire that tore at her dress, through grass tall enough to hide snakes and worse. Lungs burning, heart pounding louder than her steps. Fear carried her farther than pain ever could. Somewhere in that blind sprint, pain struck her thigh like a driven nail, but she didn't stop. When her legs finally gave out, she fell hard beside the cottonwood, yanking her skirt up out of instinct to protect herself from whatever came next. That was how Silas found her. And that was why, when he knelt there now, she saw not a rescuer but the last danger she might survive. Silas hadn't ridden out that morning looking for trouble, and he sure as hell wasn't looking for a woman. He was a rancher checking fence lines, doing the sort of work that keeps a man alive by habit more than hope. But when he saw Clara shaking on the ground, pale as chalk, something old and sharp woke up in him. Not want, urgency, the kind that comes from watching. Calves die of snakebite, and once, seeing a young hand not make it because help came too late. Silas didn't talk about bravery, and he didn't ask permission. He worked. He cut the outer layer of her, dressed just enough to keep the cloth from binding the swelling. His eyes stayed on the wound and nowhere else. He wrapped his bandana firm around her leg, close enough to help, loose enough to let blood move. He'd buried one good man over less, and he wasn't about to watch it happen again while his hands still worked. Clara watched every movement, muscles locked, waiting for betrayal that never came. She'd seen men use knives and mouths as excuses, and she knew how ugly that could turn. He wasn't here to play hero. He was here to buy her time. Silas angled his body so the open plains could see his hands, not her skin. He could already feel eyes on him, even before the riders showed themselves. That confused her almost as much as the fear. Then Silas heard it again. Hoofbeats, closer now. 3 riders, not wandering, not lost, moving like men who knew exactly what they were coming for. He straightened a little, jaw tight, already measuring distance, time, and poison. If this kind of hard choice story is your kind of ride, subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Because the next decision Silas makes doesn't just risk his life, it risks his name. He leaned closer, keeping his hands where Clara could see them. His voice low and steady. "Miss, I don't know what you ran from," he said, "but it's riding this way, and that bite won't wait." Clara tried to pull back, pride wrestling pain and pain winning fast. Her legs screamed and tears flashed despite her jaw locked tight. Silas didn't curse her for it. He shifted, planting himself between her and the open ground, like a fence post set on purpose. That was when she noticed something men with bad intentions never do. He kept his eyes off her, fixed instead on the grass where the sound was coming from. The hoofbeats were heavy now, 3 horses keeping pace like they'd practiced it. Silas glanced once toward the low rise where his horse was tied. 30 yards of open ground. If he ran for it, he might draw fire. If he stayed, they'd be found. And if he lifted her onto the saddle, anyone watching would have the story wrong before sundown. He breathed out slow, the sound of a man stepping past the last safe thought. "I'm going to get my horse," he said. Clara's eyes widened. "You're leaving?" He shook his head once. "No, ma'am. I'm gambling my whole life on not leaving." He moved low through the grass, reached the reins, and led the horse back the same way, heart hammering like it wanted out. When he returned, he didn't grab her like cargo. He braced, guided, lifted her slow and careful, breath by breath. Hands on her with her skirt hiked. It would look wrong. Dead wrong. By sundown, Laramie would have it decided. Old Silas taking advantage of a helpless girl. Lies like that traveled faster than any horse he owned, and once they took root, even truth couldn't pull them free. He settled in behind the saddle, one arm steady around Clara, the other holding the reins like they were the last honest thing left. He didn't look back at the riders. He didn't push the horse harder than it could stand. He rode like a man who knew panic makes more graves than bullets. As the plain stretched out behind them, Clara's breathing slowed, and Silas felt the full weight of the choice already made. He hadn't chosen safety. He'd chosen to stand when walking away would have been easier. That kind of decision followed a man longer than tracks in dust. Later, people would argue about what they thought they saw. But only Silas would know what he nearly lost by doing right. And that is the question this story leaves hanging. When silence protects you but costs someone else everything, what do you choose? What kind of man are you when the moment gives you no clean answer? Silas rode with the steady patience of a man who knew that speed invited eyes. The horse felt the tension anyway, muscles bunching beneath the saddle, ears twitching at the sounds behind them. Clara's weight leaned into him, light but unsteady, her breath shallow and uneven. Each exhale brushed his arm, a reminder that time was already being spent, whether he liked it or not. The bandana around her leg was darkening, not with blood, but with the ugly promise of swelling pushing against cloth. Venom didn't rush like panic. It crept quiet and sure. And Silas had learned long ago that quiet killers were the hardest to outrun. The plains around them looked wide and empty, the kind of emptiness that made men careless. He knew better. Empty spaces carried sound a long way, and guilt even farther. Behind them, the hoofbeats didn't fade. They held their distance, just far enough to watch without committing, like wolves testing a fence. Clara shifted slightly, pain dragging a sound out of her throat before she could stop it. Silas tightened his arm just enough to steady her, not enough to cage her. He spoke without turning his head. "Easy now, breathe slow." She laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Easy's already gone," she said. He didn't argue. Arguing wasted air. The riders stayed back, but they were there, a presence that pressed against his spine. Silas kept his pace even, choosing a line that bent toward a shallow draw where the grass grew thicker, and the ground dipped just enough to break sight. If they were going to make a move, it would be there. Clara followed his gaze and understood more than she wanted to. "You think they're coming for me?" she said. "Or for you?" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Coming's coming." The draw rose to meet them, and for a moment the world narrowed to green stems and dust and the sound of hooves too close for comfort. One rider called out, his voice carrying easy, like he was starting a friendly conversation. "Morning, old-timer. Looks like you got yourself some trouble." Silas didn't answer. He kept riding, eyes forward, posture loose but ready. The voice came again, closer now. "That girl all right?" Clara stiffened. Silas felt it before he saw it, the way fear tightened her like wire. He could have spoken then, could have told them about the snake, the ranch, the running. But stories told in the open didn't stay yours. They got picked apart, passed around, sharpened. He tipped his hat without looking back. "Taking her to town," he said. "Doctor's quicker than talk." That earned a short laugh from one of them. "Funny thing," the rider said. "Town's the other way." Silas slowed just enough to make the moment stretch. Didn't stop, just slowed. "Roads twist out here," he said. "So do days." The laugh died. Silence filled the space instead, heavy and measuring. For a breath, Silas thought they might force it right there. Pull him down and let the truth get trampled under hooves. But the riders held. One spat into the grass. "You be careful, old man," the voice said. "Looks like trouble's already found you." Silas didn't answer. He rode on, the draw swallowing the sound behind them until there was only wind again. Clara sagged a little once the ground leveled out. Her strength was bleeding away in pieces too small to notice until they were gone. Silas felt it and adjusted, angling toward a line of cottonwoods marking a creek bed. Shade bought minutes, water bought more. He slid down once they were covered, grounding the horse with a soft word, then eased Clara off, laying her back against the trunk of the nearest tree. She was sweating now. Skin clammy, eyes glassy. "How bad is it?" she asked. He didn't dress it up. "Bad enough we don't wait." He checked the swelling, jaw tightening despite himself. He'd hoped for slower. He reached for his knife. Clara's eyes tracked the movement and widened. "Don't," she said. He met her gaze for the first time since he'd found her. "I won't hurt you," he said. "I won't do anything you don't see coming." He cut the bandana away, careful, exposing the bite. The skin around it was angry, raised, the punctures dark. He cleaned it with water from his canteen, working fast but steady. The old tricks ran through his head, half-remembered and mostly wrong. He chose what he knew. Keep it clean. Keep her warm. Keep moving. He tore another strip from his shirt and rewrapped her leg. Clara watched his hands, the way they shook just a little when he wasn't thinking about them. "You've done this before," she said. "Enough," he answered. That was truth and warning both. They rested only as long as it took for her breathing to steady. Silas lifted her back onto the saddle, slower now, careful of her leg. The horse shifted, sensing her weakness, but stood. As they rode, Clara's thoughts wandered, words slipping out between breaths. She told him about the letter, the promise of work, the neat handwriting that had seemed so safe. She told him about the latch, the look in the man's eyes. Silas listened, jaw set, anger a dull heat under his ribs. He didn't interrupt. Out here, a woman's words were often the first thing people tried to steal. When she finished, there was a long stretch of quiet broken only by hoofbeats and wind. "You didn't have to stop," she said finally. "You could have ridden past." He nodded once. "I know." That answer cost him more than it looked like. Ahead, the land rose toward the faint line of town, buildings just starting to show themselves against the sky. With it came the heavier danger. Riders on the road, eyes at windows. Stories already forming before facts ever arrived. Silas straightened his shoulders. The worst part was still ahead. Saving her life was the easy piece. Keeping his own was going to take longer. Town came at them slow and unavoidable. Like a verdict you could see from a mile out but couldn't step around. The first building sat low and plain. Wood bleached by sun and wind, edges softened by dust. Smoke lifted from a chimney somewhere, thin and domestic. The kind of normal detail that made everything else feel sharper by contrast. Silas felt Clara shift again, her weight lighter now, like she was hollowing out from the inside. Her breath hitched every few seconds, shallow enough to worry him. He angled the horse toward the street that would take them past the livery and straight to the doctor. Avoiding the hotel porch where men gathered to watch the day go by, Even so, eyes found them. They always did. A woman slumped against a man who wasn't her. Husband drew attention faster than a gunshot. Silas kept his face set, neither defensive nor bold. He'd learned long ago that guilt often lived in the shoulders. He kept his level. They passed a pair of men outside the mercantile. One tipped his hat. The other didn't. Clara felt it. The way the air changed when judgment entered it. She tried to sit straighter and failed, a small sound escaping her before she could stop it. Silas tightened his arm again, steadying her, feeling the heat of her through his sleeve. "Easy," he murmured. "Not for show, not for anyone else, just for her." A boy ran past, chasing a hoop, laughing, the sound bright and wrong in the middle of everything. The normal kept going. That was how towns worked. They swallowed trouble and kept chewing. At the doctor's office, Silas swung down and called out before anyone could decide what they were seeing. "Snakebite," he said. "Rattler. Fresh." The doctor appeared in the doorway, hair wild, sleeves already rolled. "Get her inside," he snapped. "All business, no curiosity yet." That helped. Inside, the light dimmed, the smell of alcohol and old wood replacing dust. Silas eased Clara onto the table, stepping back immediately, hands open. He didn't miss the way the doctor looked at him, quick and assessing. The doctor cut the remaining cloth away, examined the wound, swore under his breath. "You did right bringing her fast," he said. Silas nodded. Didn't say anything else. He stood where he could see the door. While the doctor worked, Clara drifted, words tangling, eyes fluttering. She reached once, fingers catching Silas's sleeve like it was the last solid thing in the room. "Don't go," she whispered, not loud enough for anyone else. He stayed. When the doctor finally straightened, his face said enough. "She'll live," he said, but it was a narrow promise. "Needs rest and quiet." Silas let out a breath he'd been holding since the cottonwood. "Thank you," he said. The doctor nodded, then his eyes sharpened. "You her kin?" Silas shook his head. "Found her on the plains." That was enough truth for now. Outside, voices gathered, low and curious. The door opened and a woman stepped in, apron dusted with flour, concern written plain. "I heard," she said. Clara looked at her, fear flickering again. The woman smiled, soft and solid. "You're safe," she said, and meant it. That was another small mercy. Silas stepped out into the street and felt the weight hit him full. The riders were there. Two now, horses tied, leaning like they belonged. One smiled when he saw Silas. "You made it to town after all," he said. Silas met his eyes. Had to, girl was bitten. That earned a look between them. "Funny thing about stories," the rider said. "They grow legs once they hit dirt." Silas nodded. "That they do." He walked past them without another word, feeling the burn between his shoulders. He knew how this would go. By nightfall, someone would be saying they'd seen him kneeling, hands where they didn't belong. By morning, it would be fact. He went to the livery, settled his horse, paid in cash. The stable hand watched him too, closely. When Silas stepped back onto the street, he could feel his name slipping, just a little like a knot working loose. He didn't run. He went to the cafe, ordered coffee, sat where he always did. If he hid, it would look like guilt. If he stayed, it might look like nerve. Neither guaranteed a thing. The sheriff came in just after noon. He took the chair across from Silas without asking. "Heard you had yourself a morning," he said. Silas met his gaze. "I did." The sheriff waited. Silas let the silence stretch. Finally, the sheriff sighed. "Girl's alive," he said. "Doctor says you likely saved her." Silas nodded once. Then the sheriff leaned closer. "But folks are talking." Silas looked down at his coffee. "Folks always do." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "You planning on leaving town?" "Not today," Silas said. The sheriff nodded, stood. "That's good," he said. "Would look bad if you did." When he left, Silas finished his coffee, bitter and cold. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying voices, half-glimpsed judgments. He stood, squared his shoulders, and walked back toward the doctor's office. He wasn't done yet, and he wouldn't be. Silas paused outside the doctor's door longer than necessary, listening to the muffled sounds inside, the scrape of a chair, the low murmur of a woman's voice, not yet steady but no longer slipping away. That sound mattered more than whatever waited for him on the street. When he stepped in, the room felt smaller, warmer, crowded with concern instead of suspicion. Clara lay pale but conscious, her eyes finding him the moment he crossed the threshold. Relief flickered there, quick and unguarded, before she remembered herself and looked away. The woman from earlier sat beside her, holding a cup to her lips, coaxing her to drink. The doctor gave Silas a look that said not now, not questions, not speeches. Silas nodded and stayed near the wall, present without pressing. That was a skill he'd learned late in life, after mistakes that didn't need repeating. Time passed the way it does in rooms where waiting matters. Slow, uneven, measured in breaths instead of minutes. Clara slept, then woke, then slept again. The venom worked its way through, angry but losing ground. When the doctor finally said she was past the worst of it, the words landed soft but heavy. Outside, the town went on collecting opinions. Inside, a life held. Silas took the small victory and didn't ask for more. When Clara woke again, clearer this time, she looked at him and spoke with effort. "You stayed." He shrugged. Wasn't done. She studied him, really looked, as if trying to line up the man in front of her with the stories already circling. "Thank you," she said finally. He nodded once. "You rest." She hesitated, then said the thing that had been weighing on her since the plains. "They'll talk, won't they?" He didn't lie. "Yes, ma'am." She swallowed. "I can tell them," she said. "I can say what happened." Silas shook his head gently. "You don't owe anyone your pain. Let them chew on their own words." She watched him, something firm settling in her expression. "I won't be quiet," she said. He believed her. By evening, the street outside the doctor's office was quieter, curiosity giving way to supper and drink. Silas stepped out into the cooling air, hat low, shoulders set. A few men watched him pass. One muttered something he didn't catch and didn't try to. He walked to the edge of town where his horse waited, thinking about fences that still needed mending and how tomorrow would feel. Heavier than it should. He mounted but didn't leave. He turned back toward the doctor's office, toward the trouble he'd chosen. Inside, Clara slept, her breathing steady at last. The woman sat with her, a solid presence. When Clara woke again near dusk, Silas was still there, standing in the doorway like he belonged to the waiting more than anywhere else. She met his eyes. "You could go now," she said. He shook his head. "Not yet." Night settled in, bringing with it the quieter danger. Men talked more freely after dark, and ink traveled faster than horses. Silas heard the first version before he ever left the building, a whisper carried in by someone who thought they were helping. He didn't flinch. By morning there would be more. By the next day they'd sharpen. When the doctor finally said she could be moved, Silas arranged it without fanfare. A room with a woman who would watch her, a place where doors stayed open. Clara insisted on walking what little she could, leaning on her own strength as much as his arm. People watched. "Let them," she seemed to say with her back straight and her jaw set. At the boarding house, she turned to him before going inside. "I won't forget what you did," she said. He tipped his hat. "Don't need to. Just live." She hesitated, then nodded and went in. Silas rode out at dawn the next morning, not because he was running, but because work waited and fences didn't care about stories. He knew what would follow him, knew some doors would close easier than they used to. He also knew Clara would heal, and that mattered. Days later, when the talk reached its loudest, another thing followed it. Clara's voice. She told her story plain, without dressing it up or asking permission. Some listened. Some didn't. The dangerous witnesses wore clean collars and carried ink, and they tried to make the world small enough to fit their version. It didn't fully work. Truth rarely won clean, but it left marks. Silas kept his name, not without cost, but intact enough to live with. He went on mending fences and riding the same ground, quieter for what it had shown him. Clara went on too, carrying her own scars and her own spine. Sometimes the choices that define us don't announce themselves. They arrive when no one is watching, when doing right costs more than silence. Out on the Wyoming plains, a man's name can be taken in a minute. Silas learned that keeping it takes a lifetime of small, stubborn decisions made when the answer isn't clean and the dust hasn't settled yet.